Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 721, and today is December 3rd, 2024. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. I got a lot of news to get through today, but first I want to remind everyone to subscribe to the all-new Kyle Anzalone show. Wherever you're listening to the show, it's at the very top of the show notes page. So if you're on, YouTube, you're gonna have to copy and paste it into a new tab, and you could go and subscribe. If you're on the Institute site, you could very easily just click the very first link in the show notes page, and that will take you to the all-new page for the Kyle Anzalone show, and you could very easily subscribe. The Kyle Anzalone show is a big improvement over Conflicts of Interest, and I have a production team helping me out, helping me put together a higher quality show for y'all, so it's just a far more enjoyable experience for listening and absorbing the news. So again, it's a fantastic show. You're really going to love it. Everybody who's been a longtime Conflicts of Interest listener who has checked out the Kyle Anzalone show has told me that, just like you say, it's Conflicts of Interest, but a lot better. And we've only done 2 episodes so far. We're recording the 3rd episode today, so you don't miss it. Subscribe to the show, check it out. I really appreciate it. All right, and with that, we're going to jump right into the news today. First story up here. White House says it is not considering giving nuclear weapons to Ukraine. So responding to a report in the New York Times, a top White House official said President Joe Biden was not considering transferring nuclear weapons to Ukraine. The New York Times article stated that U.S. and European officials had discussed giving a nuke to Kiev, and it drew a stiff rebuke from Russia. So National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said on Sunday that is not under consideration, no. What we are doing is surging various conventional capabilities to Ukraine so they can effectively defend themselves and take the fight to the Russians, not giving them nuclear capability. The remark was in response to a New York Times article that stated, quote, U.S. and European officials are discussing deterrence as a possible security guarantee for Ukraine, such as stockpiling a conventional arsenal sufficient to strike a punishing blow if Russia violates a ceasefire. Several officials even suggested that Mr. Biden could return nuclear weapons to Ukraine that were taken from it after the fall of the Soviet Union. The discussions reported on by the Times were attempting to prepare Ukraine for Donald Trump's return to the White House. Over the past 2 years, U.S. and European officials have attempted to Trump-proof the war in Ukraine. Since Trump won last month's election, the Biden administration has approved Ukraine using long-range weapons to attack deep into Russia and are attempting to rush billions of dollars of weapons to Kiev. According to the New York Times, the current administration believes it has significant freedom to act without Russian retaliation during the lame duck session. So this is what the article says. But the escalation risk of allowing Ukraine to strike Russia with U.S.-supplied weaponry has diminished with the election of Mr. Trump. Biden administration officials believe, calculating that Putin of Russia knows he only has to wait 2 months for the new administration. Still, the report was viewed as a major escalation by the Kremlin. A Russian spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, explained that the talk was absolutely irresponsible deliberations by people who probably have poor understanding of reality and who do not feel a shred of responsibility for potential consequences. And of course, most of those potential consequences will be inflicted upon Ukraine, and so it will be the Ukrainian people that pay for this irresponsible rhetoric. I do think we're going to see some kind of response from Russia to this. I'm not quite sure what that is yet, but I would expect it sometime in the coming weeks. Now, along with this irresponsible talk about nuclear weapons, that second story should never have been written, right? That the U.S. denies that they're considering giving Ukraine nuclear weapons. Well, one of the things that they are doing for Ukraine is just showering Kiev with weapons. So let's talk about the latest arms package. This one from Dave DeCamp, December 2nd, antiwar.com. The U.S. announces new $725 million arms package for Ukraine. So the Biden administration announced on Monday a new $725 million arms package for Ukraine, which includes anti-personnel mine, ammunition for HIMARS rocket launchers, and other equipment. President Biden just recently approved the provision of anti-personnel mines for Ukraine, a step that goes against his own policy meant to limit the indiscriminate weapon. In 2022, Biden re-implemented an Obama-era policy that prohibited the transfer of U.S. anti-personnel mines outside of the Korean Peninsula. Biden's decision to send the mines has been condemned by arms control groups in many countries that are signatory to a treaty that bans the weapons. The mines, which are designed to kill our main people, have been banned by 164 countries under the Ottawa Treaty. The U.S. and Russia are not signatories to the treaty, but Ukraine is and has been in violation of the treaty. According to the AP, the purpose of the mines is for Ukraine to use them inside Russian territory in the Kursk Oblast, where Russian troops are gradually pushing out invading Ukrainian forces. The provision of the HIMARS systems means the U.S. could be sending more Army tactical missile systems, or ATACMS, which have a range of about 190 miles and are fired by the HIMARS. Two U.S. officials who spoke with the AP wouldn't confirm if the new package includes ATACMS. So according to the Pentagon, the $725 million package includes munitions for the National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile System, Stinger missiles, which are shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles, counter-unmanned systems, CUSA munitions, ammunitions for the HIMARS. Again, it doesn't specify if it's the 50-mile, 100-mile, or the 190-mile variant for that weapon. 155 millimeter and 105 millimeter artillery ammunition. Again, it doesn't specify if this is a cluster variant or not. Unmanned aerial systems, and so these are some form of drones. Non-persistent landmines, tow missiles, Javelin, and AT-4 anti-armor systems. These are all anti-tank weapons, small arms and ammunition, demolition equipment and munitions, equipment to protect critical national infrastructure. I'm curious as to what that one is. That would sound like air defense systems, but I'm sure they would have labeled it an air defense system had it been. And spare parts, ancillary equipment, services, training, and transportation. The Biden administration is looking to flood Ukraine with as many weapons as it can before President-elect Donald Trump returns to office on January 20th. President Biden has asked Congress to authorize another $24 billion for the proxy war before he leaves office, which would bring the total U.S. spending on the conflict to at least $210 billion. All right, so now take a quick moment and talk about what's going on in Georgia, the country, not the state, of course, where there are some major operations going on. And before I go through this story, I do want to repeat something I said on the last episode of Conflicts of Interest, and that is, my guess is there is a lot of this going on across the government right now, but this one I'm guessing came particularly from the intelligence community, the CIA, the DNI, someone like that went to the White House, and maybe this means Biden, maybe this means Blinken, maybe this means Sullivan, and said, here are some operations, some intelligence operations that we have been working on over the past few years that we don't think that Donald Trump is going to allow us to do. And I really wonder if the rebel offensive in Syria is a part of those operations, and then also these protests in Georgia. So this article from Dave DeCamp, U.S. bats protesters in Georgia, slams government for postponing EU talks. So the U.S. has strongly condemned Georgia's decision to postpone talks on joining the European Union and is backing anti-government protesters in the country. The Georgian Prime Minister announced he would push back talks with the European Union on Thursday after the European Parliament claimed the recent parliamentary elections in Georgia, which saw the election of the ruling Georgia Dream Party win 54% of the vote, was neither free nor fair. Last month, the European Union had halted Georgia's accession talks, accusing the country of, quote, going backwards. The Prime Minister said Georgia would not accept any grants from the European Union until 2028, the year he said the country would be adequately prepared economically to open up negotiations to become a member in 2030. In response, U.S. Ambassador to Georgia, Robin L. Dunigan, said the Georgian government discussion was the latest in a series of actions that call into question the government's commitment to the Western path. The State Department announced it was suspending its strategic partnership it had with Georgia in response to the move. The Georgian Prime Minister, downplayed the move, saying Georgia will deal with the incoming Trump administration. He also rejected the idea that he was halting Georgia's European integration, saying the EU's actions were the real issue. He said, and this is a quote, "The only thing we have rejected is the shameful and offensive blackmail, which was in fact a significant obstacle to our country's European integration." The U.S. also condemned Georgia's response to protests that began after the Prime Minister's announcement and continued through Sunday. Doland said, "I call on government to respect the rights of Georgian citizens to peacefully protest and to respect the freedom of the press to cover the protests unmolested." So Kaja Kallas, the EU's new foreign policy chief, also backed the protests, writing on X that the European bloc stands with the Georgian people and their choice for a European future. Amid the protests, Georgia's pro-Western president, Solomon Zorbacheville, is saying that she will refuse to step down when her term ends next month, calling the recent parliamentary elections illegitimate. She was born in France and once served as the French ambassador to Georgia, calling for protesters to put pressure on Georgia's constitutional court, and is demanding the court recognize the election result as rigged. She and Antonio Costa, the president of the European Council, held a call. Kallas and Antonio Costas, the head of the European Council, had a call with the Georgian president on Sunday, signaling that the EU and the president are on the same page. Costa wrote in a tweet, "Actions of the government run counter to the will of the people. The EU stands with the people of Georgia." The Prime Minister dismissed the president's comments about refusing to step down, saying she will have to when her term ends. So all this is, I think, going to continue to escalate, particularly up until Trump becomes president, and they're likely going to try to cancel the results of the recent Georgian election, because democracy only counts if the American candidate wins, and they did in that election. All right, so next up here, we are shifting over to the Middle East with this article from Dave DeCamp. Trump says there will be hell to pay if Hamas doesn't release hostages before his inauguration. So, President-elect Donald Trump warned in a post on Truth Social on Monday that there would be all hell to pay if Hamas doesn't release the remaining Israeli hostages before his inauguration. Everybody is talking about the hostages who are being held so violently, inhumanely, and against the will of the entire world in the Middle East, but it's all talk and no action, Trump wrote. "Please let this truth serve to represent if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the day I proudly assume office as President of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East and for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity." A hostage and ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas appeared close earlier this year, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu worked to sabotage it, a fact that has been widely acknowledged by Israeli media and Israeli officers. Trump added to his post, "Those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit in a long and sordid history of the United States of America. Release the hostages now." Trump's threat came after Hamas released a video of Eden Alexander, an Israeli-American IDF soldier who was taken hostage on October 7th attack on southern Israel. I guess he would technically be a prisoner of war, not just a hostage. In the video, Alexander addressed Trump and called on him to use his influence and power of the United States to negotiate our freedom. On Monday, Israel also confirmed the death of Omar Matsum Nutra, a New York-born IDF tank commander. Israel said he was killed on the October 7th attack while stationed in a tank on the Gazan border, and his body had been held by Hamas. Hamas said a total of 33 Israeli hostages have been killed in Gaza due to Israel's onslaught, and others have gone missing. Hamas recently said that an Israeli airstrike killed a female hostage in northern Gaza, a claim the Israeli military said it couldn't confirm or deny. There are believed to be 97 Israeli hostages remaining in Gaza, and Israeli media reported back in September that Netanyahu told the Knesset that only half the hostages were believed to be alive. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported in October that the Israeli government was done with ceasefire talks and was instead focused on annexing portions of the Gaza Strip. There's been some recent efforts by mediators to restart the talks, but there is no sign the effort is going anywhere. On the campaign trail, Trump called for peace in the Middle East, but also signaled he would strongly back Israel's genocidal war in Gaza. He accused President Biden of abandoning Israel, even though Biden's administration has provided more military to Israel in a single year than the U.S. has ever done before. All right, so let's talk about the ceasefire that is going on in Lebanon. This one again from DaveDeCamp.antiwar.com. After days of Israeli strikes on Lebanon that violated truce, Hezbollah fires back. Israel has launched dozens of strikes in Lebanon since the ceasefire was supposed to go into effect last week, and on Monday, Hezbollah fired back for the first time, launching 2 rockets towards Israeli-occupied territory as a warning shot, and it caused no casualties. Now, Israeli officials are vowing a major response, signaling Israel will use Hezbollah's response to repeated Israeli ceasefire violations as a reason to escalate. Hezbollah's firing at Mount Dov constitutes a serious violation of the ceasefire, and Israel will respond forcefully. We are determined to continue enforcing the ceasefire and respond to any violation by Hezbollah. A minor one will be treated like a major one, and that was a statement from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Shortly after Netanyahu's address, Israel carried out airstrikes on areas of South Lebanon, killing at least 5 people. A source within the UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon told CNN that Israel had violated the ceasefire agreement approximately 100 times since it was agreed to last Wednesday. The Lebanese government said Israel had violated it at least over 50 times. So the Israeli violations have involved gunfire, artillery shelling, and airstrikes. According to Al Jazeera, Israeli airstrikes since last Wednesday have killed 11 people. Hezbollah said the rockets fired on Monday were defensive warning shots in response to the Israeli killing and wounding of civilians. Israeli officials have claimed that Hezbollah's presence and activity in southern Lebanon is a ceasefire violation, but the agreement gives Hezbollah 60 days to move its fighters and heavy weapons to north of the Litani River. During that time, Israel is also supposed to remove its forces from southern Lebanon. According to CNN, both the U.S. and France have warned Israel that they believe the Israeli military has violated the ceasefire agreement. Axios reported that the U.S. told Israel that the ceasefire deal may unravel. The U.S. shares some of the blame for the Israeli violation since it provided Israel with a letter to assure that the Israeli military could launch unilateral strikes on Lebanon if they deemed the target was the ceasefire was being violated. These assurances from the U.S., Israel's biggest backer, were given separately from the actual agreement that was signed between Israel and Lebanon. All right, now let's move over to Syria. We got this one from Jason Ditz at antiwar.com, December 2nd. Report: Syrian Islamist court Israel with peace talk deal. So, former Israeli military intelligence officer Lieutenant Mordecai Kedar has added fuel to the claims that Israel has ties with the Syrian Islamist fighters who have taken the city of Aleppo and surrounding area in the past week. He said he is in constant contact with the Islamists and they do not consider Israel an enemy. The talk of Israeli complicity with the Islamist offensive began virtually when the offensive started, attracting attention. On Saturday, the Syrian army issued a statement saying that they are effectively fighting the military arm of the Israeli enemy, falsely labeled as the Syrian Revolution. This is particularly dramatic claim because the Islamists are led by Tahrir al-Sham, which was formed by the merger of various Islamist organizations built around Syria's branch of al-Qaeda. Indeed, the former Syrian al-Qaeda leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, is the present leader of HTS. But the former Israeli military officer offers considerable details about the ties with HTS, however, referring to them as Syrian revolutionaries and insisting they must be supported. Israel sees them as having a common interest in regime change. Israel sees them as having common interest in regime change in Syria. That does not stop at the Syrian border either. The Islamists reportedly told Lieutenant Kedar that they are ready for a peace deal with Israel after they take over all of Syria and Lebanon. They also said they plan to open Israeli embassies in both Damascus and Beirut. How far the contact goes isn't totally clear, but the military officer said that he recently passed a detailed list of requested items from the Islamists to the Israeli government. He didn't say what items were requested. That's not an unprecedented occurrence, however. Former Israeli Army Chief Gabi Eschat acknowledged in 2019 that Israel had supplied weapons to the Syrian Islamists, including the Nusra Front, which later formed HTS. Nusra Front was the middle between HTS and Al-Qaeda. Jolani rebranded Al-Qaeda in Syria as the Al-Nusra Front to get weapons from the United States and support from the United States, and then they rebranded again into HTS once Al-Nusra and other Syrian groups that were, different factions of Islamist and jihadist and Tafriki, Uyghurs from China and just different jihadists from all over the place, kind of merged under one banner, HTS. And ISIS was also defeated around that time, so I'm sure there's some ISIS guys that ended up as a part of the HTS coalition. So the Syrian opposition were suggesting shared interests with Israel as far back as 2014 with the founding of the Liberal Democratic Union Party, urging Syrians to collaborate with Israel. At that time, though, he identified the enemy not just as Iran and other allies, but included Al-Qaeda. Now, Al-Qaeda remnants, more or less, are the opposition looking to collaborate with Israel. Around that time, Israeli officials were acknowledging that despite the claim of neutrality in the Syrian civil war, they preferred seeing ISIS take over Syria rather than Bashar al-Assad remain in power. All this new talk of sending equipment to HTS is only going to add to the view that the group is in league with the Israeli aggression in the region. The timing of the HTS offensive adds to that, since Israel spent much of early November attacking Syria on a near daily basis. All right, let's move on and talk about our old friend Julian Assange, who we all hope he is enjoying his life of freedom with his wife and children. Reps Massey and McGovern urged Biden to pardon Julian Assange. So House Representative Thomas Massey and James McGovern have sent a letter to President Biden urging him to pardon WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, to send a message that Biden will not target or investigate journalists and media outlets simply for doing their jobs. So the letter says, "We write first to express our appreciation for your administration's decision last spring to facilitate a resolution of the criminal case against publisher Julian Assange and to withdraw the related extradition request that had been pending in the United Kingdom." Assange was freed in a plea deal earlier this year after spending more than 5 years in London's Belmarsh prison while battling a U.S. extradition request. He was indicted by the Trump administration in 2019 for exposing U.S. war crimes by publishing classified documents leaked to WikiLeaks by former Army Private Chelsea Manning in 2010. Under the indictment, Assange could have faced up to 175 years in prison in the U.S. for publishing the documents, a standard journalistic practice. While the plea deal set him free, it required him to plead guilty to violating the Espionage Act. Massey and McGovern's letter said, "The terms of Mr. Assange's plea agreement have now set a precedent that greatly deepens our concern. A review of the prosecutions under the Espionage Act makes clear that Mr. Assange's case is the first time the act has been deployed against a publisher." The lawmakers pointed to comments from Jody Ginsburg, the CEO of the Committee to Protect Journalists, who said, "While we welcome the end of his detention, the United States' pursuit of Assange has set a harmful legal precedent by opening the way for journalists to be tried under the Espionage Act if they receive classified information from whistleblowers. Massey and McGovern conclude their letter by saying, "We therefore urge you to consider issuing a pardon for Mr. Assange. A pardon would remove the precedent set by the plea and send a clear message to the U.S. government under your leadership will not target or investigate journalists and media outlets for simply doing their job." According to Fox News, Assange's brother, Gabriel Shipton, is headed to Washington in January to push for a pardon before Biden leaves office, which would be great. Now we're going to wrap up the show here by talking about what's happening in Taiwan. This one again from Dave DeCamp. U.S. OK's new arms sale for Taiwan. Taiwanese president visits Hawaii. So the U.S. approved a new arms transfer to Taiwan on Friday, a day before the Taiwanese president, William Lai Chang-te, arrived in Hawaii for a 2-day visit as a part of a tour of the region. The Pentagon's Defense Security Cooperation Agency said the Biden administration approved 2 potential arms deals for Taiwan. One is for spare parts for the island's fleet of U.S.-made F-16 fighter jets. That's worth $320 million. The other sale is for supporting and maintaining a military communication system known as the Improved Mobile Scriber Equipment and is worth $65 million. The approval of the sales comes as China has been stepping up its warnings to the U.S. that Taiwan is a major red line. In a statement on the new arms deal, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said it sent the wrong signal to Taiwanese independence forces and vowed there would be a response. The ministry said China will follow closely with the developments and take resolute and strong measures to defend our nation's sovereignty and territorial integrity. China also strongly opposed any official contact between Taiwanese and U.S. officials and slammed President Lai's visit to Hawaii. He stopped in the U.S. state while on a trip to the Pacific Island nations that, unlike the U.S., have formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Let me reiterate that China firmly opposes any form of interaction between the U.S. and Taiwan region, firmly opposes any visit by leader of Taiwanese authorities to the U.S. in any name or under whatever pretext, and firmly opposes any form of U.S. convenience to support Taiwan's independence, separatists, and their separatist activities, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning said on Friday. Mao also pointed to recent talks between Chinese President Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden, in which the Chinese leader reiterated that Taiwan was a major red line, and unfortunately, the U.S. doesn't understand other countries' red lines, and so I'm sure we're going to trample on that thing until we provoke China to do absolutely something reckless in the Pacific. All right, everybody, that's where I'm wrapping up the show for today. Again, subscribe to the Kyle Anzalone Show. We will have a new episode out either today or tomorrow morning, and I'm sure you're really going to love it. Conflicts of Interest returns on Thursday. Thanks, everyone.